Everybody. Welcome to this very special PhD support group meeting. This is the Tuesday session of the weekly UKZN Doctoral Academy program. I'm Lenny Liebenberg, and thank you again for joining us today. Some housekeeping. I see to any new participants joining us today, this is a very, very casual, very supportive space, and we really do encourage interaction. I'm pretty sure that we won't have a problem with that today, especially with this topic. I'd like you to really please feel free to comment or post questions in the chat box. Use your reaction icons, your emoticons to express how you're feeling, or express your thoughts in a constructive manner. Raise your hand if you'd like to also be vocal, if you'd like to voice your opinion. To those of us who are a little bit shy, that's fine. You're also welcome to send me a private message, and I'm happy to read your comment or question anonymously if that suits you better. Right, okay, so I think that's all the housekeeping that I need to mention. Today's session, I'm very sure, is going to be a lively one because we probably all have an opinion about this particular topic of managing your supervisor. We should. We are a community of postgrads. We've conducted research under supervision, and I'm pretty sure we'll all attest to how important the student and supervisor relationship is and how it can contribute to you successfully completing your goal of conducting research, learning something, mastering something, and of course, having your knowledge and competency be acknowledged through getting an academic degree. Today, leading the discussion, we have Prof. Colleen Aldous, who really needs no introduction, especially to our regular attendees of the Doctoral Academy program and the PhD support group. She has a prolific track record of supervision and a vast experience in academia and is well qualified to lead this very special discussion. She'll be joined by two PhD students in the School of Laboratory Medicine and Medical Sciences. These two students are willing to share their tips and tricks to optimize their relationship with their supervisor. Of course, Tando and Musa may belong to a different college to you. They may have had different experiences to what you have had, and may even benefit from any tips or tricks to managing your supervisor, from you. So please feel free to pop any questions or comments in the chat box, raise your hand, interact, and let's enjoy the session. With that, let me hand over to Colleen. Colleen, would you like to share any slides or?
No, we just, okay. It's too important to reduce to slides. And I'm certainly not going to take up too much time in lecturing. We've got another 3 people on our panel. I've got somebody from nursing who's coming on as well, and 2 of my students as well from the School of Clinical Medicine. So we've got 5 people from across the college. I've got Chef, I've got Prisha, who are my students, and Shamila. So and we also, important for me to note, for you to note, is we've got Willie Thaver attending as well. And it's important that she is here because she can hear what's the issues that can occur. Now, this is a safe space. I have never had a rotten experience with a student, and I have seen many rotten experiences, and I've often had to intervene, and so I don't take sides at all. I'm experienced enough to know that I'm not going to take anybody's side here today. I'm not going to defend anybody. I'm not defending supervisors. I'm not going to defend the students. I just want you to express things. I have had experiences where I've had to pick up students because they've had really bad supervisory experiences before. So I have knowledge about how things can go wrong. And when I was academic leader for research, I saw it. So it's very real that there can be problems with the supervisor-student relationship. But let's not think about the worst. Let's just think about the fact that this is a relationship between two human beings. It's not a relationship between an inferior and a superior. It's far from that. It's a relationship between somebody who wants to experience becoming doctorate and somebody who is there to assist helping that person to become doctorate. That is what this is. So the normal human relationships will occur because it's just two human beings. So the normal fundamentals of running a relationship, a friendship, a relationship in a family will hold here. It's courtesy, it's respect, and it's got to be mutual all the time. But there's also something else that comes through, and I think a lot of people have this, is the fear of the supervisor. And if you can get past that and start seeing that person as another human being, just 10 years or 20 years more advanced in the career, but you might be further than they were at your time of life. In fact, let's compare me and Lenine. When I was Lenine's age, I had just finished my honors. Lenine is already an associate professor. So we're all the same. We've just had different experiences through our lives. But the way students are brought up from school is to think the professor is somebody up there. You do not question. You just do as you're told. And your professor's thinking, when is the student going to start thinking? When are they going to start becoming? So that's one of the things you've got to get past. So that's all I'm going to say is I'm very aware of the issues that can occur. I want to make the point that, remember, we're all just equals. We just have differences, but we are equal human beings. And I'm going to open the floor, and I'm here to chair and to listen to you, and maybe between us we can come up with solutions. We've got Willie with us. We've got 5 people who are going to speak about how they manage their supervisors, and then we're going to open the floor and we'll listen to what you have to say. So, Lenine, would you like to introduce one of your speakers and your panelists, and then I will introduce mine, and then we can get the 5 people to speak.
Right, so of the 2, let me just randomly select Thando, because your face is right on my screen right now. You are now welcome to open the floor with your tips, your tricks, any sort of discussion about your experiences managing your supervisor as a postgraduate here at UKZN.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Thando, and yeah, I'll just share. I'll try to limit what I have to share because I do know that there's quite a few of us. I think for me, one of my best tips or tricks that I think has really worked well is setting deadlines before the deadline. I think that often, I know that I've personally got an issue with a bit of procrastination, but the reality is also that when you're managing not only your timetable or schedule and somebody else's, it can get tricky. By the time that the deadline has arrived, you could be really stressed because they don't have time, and you find that sometimes things have to be edited, but actually there's no more time to edit. So what I've really found is setting a deadline way before the deadline, so that if there's anything that happens or their kind of schedules gets interrupted by something, you're still well within your time to submit what you need to submit when you need to submit it. Secondly, is also knowing what's on their plate and capitalizing on that, for me, is another tip. So in the moments where you can see that they're not as swamped, to pack them with stuff. Sorry, it sounds horrible, but it really works. So in the seasons where, because I think we all know our supervisors, and sometimes you can find that you can really see that they're swamped, and like Prof was saying, that they're also human beings. They have families and they have jobs and other things that they're doing, but sometimes you find that there's a bit of a gap in their schedule. And for me, another tip is to really capitalize on that and get the most in that you can, so that when they go to a stretch of being busy, you have all your edits and what you need to do next, then you can work on your own independently, so that the next time they get a break, you patch them again. A third one for me that I think is really helpful just in growing holistically is also getting involved in the things that they're involved in. And I'll say what I mean by this, but I think often supervisors do stuff, whether it's like presentations or applying for grants or attending talks. I think just the little things that help them on their journey. I found that really getting involved in those things helps you on your journey, because then you get prepared for the things that are coming in your stages of life. Because, for example, like I didn't think that I'd be applying for my own grants during my PhD. And things like that can be a bit of a daunting task. But if you almost walk with somebody while they're doing that on their own, then you kind of get to pick up some things and you start to learn before it's time to do it, you know. So I think that's, I don't know, you know, in the normal world, they're called job shadowing. But I guess we can call it career shadowing if it's your supervisor. But yeah, just getting to know what they do outside of just your project and their research and how they develop themselves, and kind of just trying to hop onto those things so that you're growing quicker than, yeah, as quick as you can by the time that you need to use that information. Yeah, and I think the last one in just growing holistically is getting to know your mentor as a person. I think often, you know, we look at like supervisors or mentor as like this robot, like they do everything and they can do anything all the time and they've got so much on their plate. But actually, I've found that getting to know the person really helps, because then you kind of know how they work, you know what they prefer, you know what they don't prefer, and you can kind of deliver things in a way that will be best received, you know. So I don't know, maybe I can make like any examples. So like if in an instance, let me try to think of one quickly. Yeah, so in an instance where obviously as people, we value different things, you know, and I've learned that in my journey that certain mentors value different things. So whether it's adhering to deadlines, whether it's being proactive on stuff, whether it's taking up other courses, so things like that, knowing their preferences, I've found that also helps. Yeah, I think that one is a bit hard to explain, but yeah, I think just knowing them as a person and knowing what's on their plate basically, and capitalizing, setting deadlines before the deadline, and really just, you know, being an eager beaver. I found that those 4 things have really helped me in my journey.
That's wonderful. If I can just make a couple of comments that you've made there. I think that the point that you've made about sticking to deadlines, that's a kind of a mutual respect thing. That's saying to your supervisor, I respect your time. You have me slotted in for this time, and I'm going to respect that. And you can have the same expectation. I mean, you get to know your supervisor, and you can have an expectation that you're going to get feedback within a week or 2 weeks, or however long is normal for that particular supervisor. The one thing I think all students should be aware of is the majority of supervisors are forever busy. I mean, there is never a spare moment, really. I mean, I'm lucky enough that my children are grown up out of the house. So I am minds on various things to do with work much longer than 8 hours a day. So I don't ever want a student to think that, oh, she's too busy for me to deal with it. I want a student to say, I need this done. I have my needs. I have got 3 years or 4 years to get through this. And if I am particularly busy with a particular task that cannot accommodate that, I will say to the student, I've got it. It's on my desk. Get back to me in 2 weeks if you haven't got a response from me. So don't ever think that your supervisor is not there for you because they are too busy. Make sure that you've logged in your task that you would like them to do. And they're going to be honest with you and say, not right now, give me a few days. or they will get back to you as soon as possible. So don't hold yourself back. You're the one with time limits. You're the one who's got to get your project done. Your supervisor's probably got tenure and has got a career. So don't hold back there. Lanine, did you want to comment on anything there?
Oh, wow. So many very interesting points were raised up here. I saw there was a theme regarding time. You mentioned it, Thunder's mentioned it, the importance of setting deadlines. But what I'd really like to highlight is this concept of the power imbalance. And it's so easy for students to consider their supervisors as intimidating. So, you know, this person has a long track record of publications, grants, whatever. The student puts the supervisor on this pedestal and forgets that, you know, they're actually just a person and they generally are approachable. And the reason they are here is to help you, the student, reach your goals. So the student sometimes tends to, you know, give away the power, you know, take the backseat, have a passive role in the relationship. And, you know, that ties into what you were saying with the, you know, we're going to get them to realize that this is what they should be doing. You know? So that, I think a very important lesson is for a student to realize that they actually have a lot of control. They get the most out of a student-supervisor relationship. So they have a bigger stake in this. You should be taking control of it. And what Thando is saying, you know, getting to know your supervisor, knowing their workloads, knowing, you know, just being more involved would also make you become more of a priority in their life. Supervisors have lots of things that are urgent, they need to get done, like right now. So making sure that you are on that priority list, that to-do list as a student, is the biggest tip that we could probably give you in this session. Okay, now I don't want to take too much time. Should we move on to one of the other
let's
panelists?
one of the other panelists is on my screen at the moment is Chef. Chef, would you like to show your face and make some comments about how to manage a supervisor?
Hi everybody. Thank you, Colleen. I'm Shafruddin. It's quite an interesting topic. Can you guys hear me? Fine.
Yes. Can we ask everybody else to mute themselves, please?
So I think that the most important aspect I got out of the introduction was that it is a relationship, number one, but it's also a relationship between equals. And yes, of course, academically and with your qualifications, you could be your supervisor may seem to be superior, but it is a relationship between equals. And as such, you form a bond with your supervisor, and that bond is like any other bond. And it's sort of a marriage where you're sharing an academic and a personal relationship with this person. And the trick is to find the correct ratio, because really your PhD becomes part and parcel of your life. It permeates every aspect of your life. And yes, your supervisor does have many students to supervise, but you need to know the ratio of what would be academic and what would be personal, because there would be issues that come up in your life that you would need to take a break from, or you may not be able to make a meeting or make a deadline, and that's important to communicate that. So it does become personal. I think also being honest and being honest with your supervisor about what you can accomplish and what you can't accomplish and where you need the help. Because sometimes when it seems like an imbalanced relationship, it's very difficult to say, I'm sorry, Prof, but I don't think I can get through this. I don't understand this. So if you're honest about it, then the expectations are different. And we must realize that supervisors are sitting with a lot of students, each different. So it's like having, once again, I bring in the family analogy, where there's different, you have a number of kids, each one's different, each one's at a different level. And yes, when you knock on that door and you say, sorry, Prof, are you busy? And your supervisor just seems, engaged in something, sometimes you want to take a step back. And when they say come in, you're not sure whether they have your full attention. But you need to also manage that relationship. The trick that I found as well is that I had supervisors both where I was based in the department, and then you get to see this busy professor who's up and down with meetings and Zooms, and then you feel that you have no place. And then you have a supervisor where you spend a limited amount of time face to face with them. And in that way, you share more, actually, I think. I also, one of the tricks I use or I have is that I tend to have meetings that's not based in the academic complex as such. So maybe meeting at a coffee shop where there's less academic distractions and people walking in. And then you are able to balance that academic versus personal relationship, because essentially your relationship is about knowledge transfer. And the knowledge transfer occurs both ways, not just one way. Students must not feel inferior in any way. So I feel that when you're not in that academic complex or institution, you are able to share a bit more. The other things that I think that managing your time constraints and managing your conflicts are important as well, because there will be conflicts that come up. And your conflicts can be that you're a full-time employee and you're a student as well, and your supervisor has many students to supervise. So you need to find that balance. So a lot of all the relationship building that you have with your mentor is about balance and about managing the conflicts and making sure that your relationship is steady and it takes you through, because oftentimes the expectation is too great from a supervisor, or the expectation is far less from a student, and there's no balance. So yeah, so for me, it's about balance and relationship maintenance. And those are very important aspects for me. Thanks.
Yes, I think you've made a very good point again about this power relationship, that to realize that we are all equals. We're on this planet at the same time. One of the people in the relationship has more skills in an area, and as a student, you're trying to glean those skills. Shafruddin is my student now. He's done two other masters, I believe, Shaf. Yeah. So he's talking about his other experiences as a supervisor of supervisors. But I need to know from Shaf what skills he requires from me in order to become doctorate. And the only way I can do that is by talking to him. I can't just assume things. He's got two completely different master's degrees. So you need to have that kind of personal relationship. I also need to know that he's got two daughters. I need to know if one of them is ill, because then I need to know why he hasn't done what I would expect a PhD student to do. So there is this level, this balance that Shaf was talking about, is knowing the personal side and getting the skills developed, making sure the knowledge that's required, all the doctoral attributes are provided, but there is background, and that can only come through talking, having an easy relationship, being able to chat over a cup of coffee. Deneen, anything from your side on that?
The communication absolutely is key. I'm going to touch on one specific thing that Shaf mentioned, how to make your relationship steady. So that's a very important concept. And a lot of people might be thinking, oh, how do you do that? And I'm sure if you are wondering that, please post any questions in the comments or any tips for how to make a relationship steady. Here's my one, for example. Setting boundaries and clear expectations of what each party wants. For example, Colin was speaking about what sort of what areas of doctorateness would I need to assist with in this relationship. And that's a discussion that needs to be had between student and supervisor. Communication is absolutely key, and getting those expectations out up front is so important. Acknowledging that the relationship will change over time as you develop, as you know more, as you become the expert and surpass your supervisor. You need different things from this relationship, and you need to be able to communicate that throughout the experience. Thank you for those important points, Shaf, and the continued discussion. I see there's a hand up. Zakia, you'd like to comment on the content?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can I go? Okay.
Yes,
Hi,
go ahead.
everyone.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Zakia Salad, and it's my first time here. I'm a PhD student at UKZN right now, and thanks for this amazing session. I really appreciate it. So we're stressing on the importance of communication, right? So I have one really important question. So what do we generally do if a supervisor does not reply to you like at all? So you being proactive and doing whatever you need to do, even like for your degree, and like even if you're busy with another supervisor, like your other supervisor, and keeping them updated all the time, giving them updates of your PhD, but you try to be a PhD student, right? So like giving them updates of your project, requesting for meetings, giving your stuff for them to check, but they're not responsive, or even in the rare case that they are, then it's to say like, hey, I'll get back to you, or they are sick, or like basically every other thing besides getting like, being proactive and trying to basically, help you, basically being a supervisor. So in that case, what do you do?
Zakia, may I ask that we hold your question until all the panelists have spoken? Because we can go into answering your question and it could take a long time, but we will come back to your question. Is that okay?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Lenine, would you like to introduce your next panelist?
Yeah, sure. So we have Namusa Zondo, also from LMMS. Namusa, are you here? Can you please unmute yourself?
Yes, I'm here, Lini.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Thank you. I wanted to share a slide, but I'm seeing that people are not sharing anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and read up. So for me, I found that communication is key, and I feel like a lot of these points have been said. So I'm just gonna like speak from personal experience. I found that communication is what is necessary when you are, doing your PhD or master's. And the first point is to learn your supervisor's personality. And the reason why I say that is because I'm not the loudest person like in the world. I'm a very reserved and shy person, and a lot of time people can misinterpret the quietness or the shyness for like not knowing anything. So it's very important to know like, okay, to learn as a supervisor, to learn your students' personality, see like what type of person they are they extroverts, are they introverts, do they like certain things, do they not like certain things, and also you as a student to also learn your supervisor's personality, and just to see certain things like what makes them angry, what makes them happy, certain things that they like and expect from you. So I feel like that's very important. The second point is to let your supervisor know what your strengths and your weaknesses are. So not all of us maybe love to go to the lab, not all of us maybe love to write, but there are certain things that we like. Maybe certain people are much more happier doing lab work and being on the lab all day and analyzing results, etc. While other people are more into like the writing and sitting down and reading and putting together, their papers, etc. So, just letting your supervisor know that, hey, I love to read, I love to sit down and write. That's what I enjoy doing. And the lab, the lab stuff might take me a bit more time to complete because it's really not something that I'm into, but because the degree, I'm supposed to do it, I'm doing it. So just to let them know that, okay, this is what I love and this is what I don't love, but I'm willing to put 100% in both of those aspects. And the third point is to manage expectations. And I feel like all the speakers today have really touched on that. Just, as a supervisor, to let your student know, okay, I expect you to finish at this time. I expect to meet you every week. I expect you to be done with so much within a month or two. And also as the student, to tell your supervisor that, okay, I can do that in a month. I can do this in a week. I can do this in, however long, so just let them know like where you stand and how are you coping with the writing and the lab work and just managing other things in your life as well. So managing expectations is very important to me as well. So to close it off, communication is key. It's a very important. Learning your supervisor's personality, letting them know your strengths and weaknesses, and managing expectations. Thank you so much.
I think that's very important, the managing expectations, but Nomusa, you must also have expectations of your supervisor. You have registered at the university in order to get a degree. So don't always think that the expectations are for you to meet. You must become very clear on the fact that you have expectations for what you need to gain. And that comes through getting to know your supervisor. And different supervisors do have different personalities. And I think if I had a cohort of students who were all fresh out of honors into masters, early 20s, I would be more prescriptive. But the majority of my students are all mature. They're mostly married with children, have families to manage. They're clinicians. They have very stressful jobs that I expect them to all tell me what their expectations are for their progress. I will in no way run around a student and say, hey, I thought you were going to do this last week and it hasn't arrived on my desk. After a period of time, I will say to people, hang on, are things okay? What's happening? I haven't heard from you in a while. So we have these different styles. We have different styles as people and also different styles to relate to people. But the important thing, Nomusa, is you must have expectations of your supervisor as well and make them clear, because you are the client. You are the one that has come to this university, is paying a fee to gain various attributes. And so expectations should come from you too.
And the MOU is very important for that. The university institutes this memorandum of understanding that sets down expectations for both supervisor and students, and that's an opportunity for both parties to sit down and discuss the contents of each. In fact, with my students, we sit together and we read aloud each line just to make sure that everyone's on the same page here, and we consider altering the content, just to ensure that all expectations, both sides, are met. One thing that I thought was really interesting from what Nomusa was saying, this concept of introspection, knowing yourself. Thando also commented on that when she was speaking, knowing I have a tendency to procrastinate. That means I need to plan to make sure that I can get the work done, that my supervisor can also assist with this. So knowing yourself helps with setting realistic expectations as well and committing to those. Some very good points here, Nomusa. Perhaps we could move on to our next panelist.
Is Shamila around? Shamila, would you like to unmute and make a couple of comments?
Thank you, Prof. Hello, everybody. I started off on the passive mode with my supervisor, me being in the passive seat. And it really cost me a lot. It cost me time. It cost me a lot of tears. And it really made me realize that I had to take charge of my degree. So what I picked up from the time this all happened to me up till now, and the process that I've been through, is that like we heard the other speakers say, you've got to understand and establish that relationship with the supervisor from the word go, understanding what's your expectations to and the supervisor's expectations to you as well, like we heard Prof say. So that really got me into a space of understanding that I had to take hold of this, because this is my degree and I've got to, get together with the supervisor that I've chosen that's the expert in the field to guide me. And sometimes it means, like Prof. Lenine was saying, understanding yourself. And I had to really look within myself and be real with myself, setting realistic deadlines. When I'm saying to my supervisor, I'll expect to hand you a certain piece of literature or work within 2 weeks, and I'm not making it because I've got every other odd thing to see to besides my life as an academic. So being real with yourself and communicating. For myself, like we heard another speaker say, she's an introvert. I was that type of person until I realized that I've got to own this. And I never used to make contact because I was afraid of what would come across to me, And so if there was time and lapses of time where I never received the feedback, it just got me into the spin of anxiety until I got to that point of saying I had to reach out for help. And when I did, I realized that I've got to make this I've got to make this relationship work, putting my expectations out there, putting what I want to get out of this out there with my supervisor and coming to a place of agreement. Up until I got to understand how my supervisor expects things to be, what type of writing my supervisor would expect when the deadlines would come through, what would be at the end of it. So it really got me thinking, and it really got me understanding. For me, I would say it made me realize that, I know this may sound horrible, but I'm in charge. It's my degree. I'm going to say to my supervisor, look, I see it this way, and probably just give back something to say, hey, I've done this piece of work, but do you think this could work better? Would this method be better? Would this option suit it better? So it came to a point right now, after years, that we can actually have a conversation about a piece of work. But I had to realize so much of that and waste so much of my time, just at the word go. If I had done these things, it would have been better. And sometimes as students, we feel that the supervisor just forgets about things. But I had to realize that if I showed proactivity, and if I had been, showing my supervisor that, I'm struggling with this piece of work. Can you help me? And then probably there would have been something coming back to me, but I just waited and I let time lapse in between, and I let the communication lag, and it created this big monster for me. So it's like a PhD altogether. Thank you, Prof.
There's nothing that a supervisor, and I think I am accurate here generally, there's nothing that a supervisor would love more than a student coming and saying, this is how I want to do my research. I need to gain these skills. These are my research questions. And of course, as a supervisor, I can say, those are realistic, those are not. I can help you, but I'm not going to take them over. And I want to write this paper by this month, and I want to do that. If a student comes to me fully in the driving seat, I am over the moon. And I think that's going to come. Just hold on a minute. There is nothing more pleasing than having the student own it, like Shamila has said, owning their project, owning their self-development, owning their doctorateness. And Lenine, would you like to comment on that? I just love the way Shamila has put it, because both you and I have walked alongside Shamila through this process and have seen this immense progress.
Absolutely. I think you've covered everything I wanted to say in comment to what Shamira had said. I would like to say something about what you just said, you know, having a student come in with like a list of this is what I would like. I've thought this through, you know, that would be the ideal. But students also don't know what they don't know. That's why you're here. So as supervisors, we should also have the capacity to develop them outside of just what they expect and grow their doctorateness in the way that we know it could be better. Yeah. So, I mean, that's also something that you could discuss up front with your supervisor. Yeah, no, I think we covered quite a bit there.
Yeah, we've got one more panelist. I hope she's with us. Prisha, are you with us? Prisha? Do you see Prisha in the chat here? Okay, it doesn't look like Prisha is with us. So we've had all our panelists have had a turn. I think we should go back to Zakia's question. An unresponsive supervisor is something that is not rare, and I've seen it crush a lot of students before, and I don't have an answer for you other than you go and see that person, and it might be terrifying. But if you go and have a face-to-face meeting with that supervisor and say, I would like to iron out a way of getting myself to move through. What is your time constraint? Can we come to an agreement? And this is where the MOU, I think the MOU states how much time there should be turnaround. Lanine, I don't read it because I find the MOU very aggressive. And I know that I actually do comply. So I sign it and let them go off. You know, I would like to see it to reword it a little. But
I reword it myself, actually.
Yeah. It's quite harsh the way it's where it's kind of, if you don't do this, then I would rather say, let's come to an agreement. In general, I'll try and get things to you maximum 2 weeks, but in general, 36 hours. Or there'll be communication when I cannot get feedback to you. But if you are not getting feedback after 2 weeks, you have every right as the client, and I hate to call students clients, but at university, you are a student learning, you're undergoing academic growth, but you're also a paying client. Whether you're paid by bursary or not, that's immaterial, but you are a client and you should have expectations. I'm going to say, let's ask Willie as well, after Lanine, if you can make some comments about this. But I have seen how it's got to a point where a student has had to actually find another supervisor. That has happened before, but that has to be an absolute last resort, because changing supervisors, you have to go through a process at college where you've got to give reasons that you want to change. You've got to let the person know why you're wanting to change. And sometimes there's just so much angst around that. So I would try and suggest right up front, say, can we just meet? Can we just sort out how long it's going to take to get feedback? Lanine?
Yes. Okay. So I do have a few points to make here, but I just want to remind myself to come back to you to ask about what the university policy is for Zakia regarding the change, and also an MOU. So for me, listening to your story, Zakia, it seems to me that you are not a priority on your supervisor's to-do list from what you're saying, and that would need to be changed. This supervisor has a job to do. We are required to submit feedback within a particular amount of time. You mentioned that there were delays, so there is some level of discussion between you and the supervisor. But I think what it boils down to is accountability. You both have jobs to do and should be doing them to the best of your ability. It seems like you have a track record of doing so. And your supervisor might need to be held accountable for not meeting you halfway there, which brings me to my next point here. I'm not entirely certain about the official next steps within your school to go through. Colleen mentioned the concept of changing a supervisor. And, that is something that many students do consider. Sometimes it really boils down to a clash in chemistry. You really just don't gel. Your personalities are really not conducive to a happy, healthy, functioning environment. And that's okay. It just means that this relationship cannot lead to a successful outcome for either of you. But if you are considering changing your supervisor, I think there are good ways to do that. A bad way would be to not record record what had happened in a professional way, or to play the blame game, or just to let emotions flare. Rather have things be as professional as possible. I'm sure Colleen or Wooly would have any additional input regarding that and the procedures for that. But yeah, I'm really sorry about this.
It's
sorry, go ahead.
It's a common problem. And what I don't understand from the supervisor side is we are encouraged by the university to get a turnover of students. So if I'm neglecting a student's work, I am holding that student back. We're trying to get a master's through in a year or 2 years and a PhD in 3 years. If I'm going to sit on the work for a long time, I just don't understand how supervisors are like that. I think that there's a lot of poor training for supervision. A lot of people are just thrown into being supervisors and they haven't had any training or experience, and you can pick up problems there. But the last resort should be changing supervisors. And for that, I would suggest you go to the academic leader in your school. And that's where the procedure starts. But be warned, it's a bit like going to court and you got the perpetrator and in the same room. You've got the innocent and the perpetrator in the one room, and it's going to be, his word, her word. It's going to be difficult. I've been through 2 cases where we've had to drop a supervisor before, and in both cases, it wasn't pleasant. So getting back to communication right up front, the first time you get a delay in your work, go and see what they're doing. But I see, Zaki, you've said there, you've made requests all the time. I think what you've got to do is consolidate in a document the number of requests that have not been responded to, and then you need to go to your academic leader of research and ask them to deal with it. They might up it to the dean, but if you've tried, that's all you can do. Wooly, can we ask you to come in on this now, if we can help Zakia, and then we'll listen to other issues from the floor.
So Colleen, thank you so much. And this is exactly the reason I joined this session. So I'm very familiar with lots of the concerns that are raised. I work with them on a daily basis, and in many ways, I also feel very stuck. I'm very grateful for all the suggestions that came up. But one of the things I constantly go back to with a student is go back to your expectations between you and your supervisor, so the MOU. But I'm not very clear that our students really understand the MOU at the outset when they are actually in that process of negotiating what are the expectations. I also think that I think it's very important that we must recognize that lots of our supervisors might not really have knowledge of what is expected of them in their role. And I think this comes right back to that, because I think it's critical that we lobby for some kind of training of supervisors and to understand what is expected of them in their role, because students, unfortunately, I've heard about it should not be about a power. It's not a power struggle between a supervisor and a student, but it essentially that is what it boils down to, because a student is so desperate to get through this program, and in many ways they feel that the supervisor is holding the reins and they just have to toe the line in many respects. So I have basically worked with my students, many on this platform, and just empowered them to be able to address aspects very much the way you and Laline have raised them now, in terms of knowing where you stand, knowing what's expected of you, what's expected of your supervisor, having conversations, documenting all the attempts you have made. But unfortunately, I'm still working with students who have become extremely disempowered because they are totally not heard. And I think the next step that we have been looking to is discussions with the academic leader of research. And I must say, changing of supervisors is not the ideal, especially when you're at the tail end of a program and you're experiencing lots of the challenges. So I'm also stuck, Colleen, and that's why I joined here to see how we can. That's what we lack. We have beautiful postgrad programs in place, but we lack protocol in terms of reporting. We lack protocols in terms of harassment and bullying. And these are things I'm actually working on with Dr. Jafta as well. And I hope we could come to some kind of, conclude something very soon for our students.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not much help.
No, but I think you're sitting like we are. How do you deal with this? I mean, I've seen where there's been favoritism at the cost of absolute neglect of students. And it all boils down to a lack of being able to relate to students as equals at a different level of skills. And that's where we've got to bring supervisor training in. And Willie, would you put your contact details in the chat so that people know that? I know every Tuesday you always say that you're available, but people, you don't allow this to go on and on and on. The longer you allow something to occur, the harder it is to sort it out. If your supervisor is sick, there's nothing wrong with you saying after 2 weeks of waiting, Prof, I haven't heard from you. Somebody's going to come back and say, look, I've been in hospital. Just give me a chance. That's fine. Nobody's going to, I mean, I don't mind if my students send me WhatsApp at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to answer them at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I understand that they are thinking at 2 o'clock in the morning because that's where they're coming from. So don't think that your supervisor is this sacred being. But I must admit that much of the education that people have been through up until varsity has encouraged passive behavior. And that is why it's so hard when you get to master's and PhD level to become active learners, to become active skills developers on your own. And you're kind of entrenched. It's almost from the time you're learning at preschool that the prof is this person who knows everything and you've got to listen to them. And that's, you're not going to get much out of that. You've got to let go of that fantasy, because that is what it is. It is a fantasy. A professorship is a promotion. You become an associate professor when you've shown that you can publish, when you've shown that you can do some supervision, when you've shown various things. then you work harder, and then you become a full professor when you've shown the next thing. It doesn't mean that you've become more untouchable. Shaf, I see you've got your hand up.
Yes, thanks. Just a bit of advice about, I've read the messages and I've heard, when choosing a supervisor, it is so important to not only look at their academic qualifications and the level of scholarship, but also choose somebody who has some degree of pedagogy in them, somebody who has the ability to teach. So just because somebody has reached the level of professor, and we find it very much in the clinical sciences, where you're a professor of something, but in terms of supervising and teaching, there's a great lack of that. So one of the things that I found is that choose somebody who has the requisite qualifications, but also is able to convert that into teaching and to help you learn. Because if they're not available because of other commitments, then you've got to find a way of changing your supervisor. I think that would be some advice I would give. Thank you.
Could I comment on that for future people who are considering a degree in the future, to speak to previous students of the supervisor you're considering? That might be a good way to gauge whether this person has the people skills to help you learn. Or another would be to consider a co-supervisor. When you're sitting down with a supervisor for the first time, you're going through the MOU, you're working through individual expectations. It might be a good option then to discuss what will happen when things go wrong. Let's say you land up in a hospital. Let's say you go on maternity leave. What's going to happen to me? Who's going to help me with my development? Is there additional support? So those are two comments if you're thinking about continuing, starting another degree in general. I do have a comment to add to the discussion. What I noted from one of the presenters was how debilitating it can be if your relationship with your supervisor is not optimal. It takes up thinking space that could be used for something else. You're feeling upset, overwhelmed, disturbed. It stops you from doing what you need to be doing. You procrastinate. And that's when it becomes very important to know who your support group is. Who can you contact when things might get that way? Willie put her comment in the chat box. This forum is very useful as well in a constructive way. I see there's a comment in the chat box about having this sort of platform. Just knowing that there's somebody else going through something similar, somebody else you can reach out to for tips and tricks. These are your people. Come join us on Tuesdays. We can discuss further. A support group is very, very important. I know time is running out over here. Colleen, Sadi, would you like to wrap up the discussion?
Well, I think I'm going to let you have the final word on this, but I think what's very important is to realize that you are in the driving seat as well. Between you and your supervisor, you are co-piloting this degree through, and you need to show that you are driven and driving. It does get difficult sometimes. It's not generally like that, but there are times when things go south. And I find people, supervisors who've made preferences towards certain kinds of people, just I find it inexcusable, and that's because we've got to acknowledge there's lack of training for some supervisors. But I think the most important thing to take away is we have got the SSS, the student support services. And if things become difficult, student support services are certainly going to help you in those initial steps to try and sort things out before they have to escalate to having to be dealt with at school level, which is harder. So just to wrap it up, make sure that you're driving yourself and make sure you go for support early if things go off the rails.
I absolutely agree. I don't think I could add to any of that, Colleen. Willie has a comment in the chat box. Panelists, please let us know if you are comfortable for the SSS team to collate your tips. These are useful to other students. This session will be aired on the YouTube, UKZN YouTube website. So for anybody who is not here today and might find this useful, please let them know that that's where they can go to view the session. And the SSS team, I see the tips look like they can be compiled for broader impact. So thank you everybody for your input today. Panelists, Colleen, thanks for your tips and your tricks. Next week, Tuesday, we have Lewin Moodley joining us. She will be discussing the importance of adopting a growth mindset. Yay to resilience. We want to succeed. So we'll see you all here next week, Tuesday, 3:30. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Take care. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.